Alright, one of the biggest challenges doing street scenes or cityscapes is the amount of detail, and trying to simplify the detail. So today I'm going to paint a scene behind me, and I'm going to be focusing on big shapes as usual to try to simplify the scene. We've got a sky shape, the road shape, and then this group of buildings on the right and group of buildings on the left. I've got my usual palette of colors, but I'm going to focus on kind of a primary color palette here using ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, cadmium yellow medium, and phthalo blue, and titanium white, using liquid original for my medium. And I'll probably use these two brushes here. This is a natural bristle number 8 and a synthetic bristle number 4. Both are flats. And I'm painting over an old 11 by 14 inch panel. This is like 10 years old. I've been sanding down a lot of panels and then painting over them. I'm using a worn out natural bristle number 2. This is a flat, and I'm going to sketch in burnt sienna. I just want a few simple lines. The sky up here, top of the road right there, kind of comes down like this. These lines will allow me to mass in my big shapes. So I'm mixing up a color for the sky using ultramarine blue, phthalo blue, and some titanium white. And I've thinned this mixture with liquid. Part of the reason I use liquid is to make sure that the paint sticks to the panel. There were times in the past where I would do a painting and then later I could actually scratch the paint off of the panel, like it didn't stick to the panel well enough. So obviously I was horrified by that. Since then I've been using liquid when I paint on panels. Sometimes when you thin the paint with odorless mineral spirits, actually always when you thin the paint with odorless mineral spirits, you're breaking down the binder, which is the oil in the paint, which is what makes it stick to the panel. So by adding liquid, I'm thinning, but I'm adding a binder. And the liquid binder is pretty strong. So anyway, there's the sky shape. All right, so mixing up a dark green here using ultramarine blue, cadmium yellow medium, and a touch of alizarin crimson. And this will be my starting color for the dark portions on the sides of the street. So in other words, this area right here and this area here. I'm gonna keep this mixture thin so that I can come over with, little shifts of color and value, value and temperature, as I always say. All right, reload the brush. And I'm squinting at the scene to simplify the shapes, just trying to mass in these large areas and kind of eliminate the old image. All right, next I want to mix up a color for the street, going with a light warm gray, but I do want to keep the value darker than the highlights on the cars in the distance, because when I put the highlights on, I want them to pop out. For the road, I'm using a mixture of titanium white, touch of ultramarine blue, cadmium yellow medium, and alizarin crimson. All of the mixes I'm making today, because I'm using a limited palette, are gonna have a bit of each of those colors in them, which will allow for color harmony. Focusing on big, simple shapes will allow you to kind of reduce, a complicated scene into something that's manageable. All right, so those are the shapes right there. All right, I'm using a mixture of ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson, kind of leaning this towards a dark purple. I'm just going to start suggesting where some of the cars are. Something like that. There's a bunch of cars over here. And there's one right there. And then one here that's kind of the closest. There's a big tree over here. I want to kind of exaggerate that tree and have maybe this side a little bit higher than this side, just to create some interest. So, at this point I'm squinting and just kind of focusing on big shapes and creating an engaging design, something that looks interesting. Feeling like I need to kind of correct this line a little bit. Something like that. All right, now what I'm going to try to do is work into these shapes with shifts of value and temperature without breaking up the overall design. This is about when you'd be tempted to get a small brush out, but I'm going to keep going with the number 8 natural Brazil flat. All right, so I've mixed up a dark green, and I'm not going to go through the mixes because I've only used 3 colors so far, and that's cadmium yellow medium, alizarin crimson, and ultramarine blue. And there's a few over here as well. I'm going to try to keep the value range, you know, of these little details or these shifts. I'm going to try to keep the value range fairly narrow. Okay, adding some cadmium yellow to the mix to warm it up. So now I'm looking for little bits of warmer green within these shapes. All right, on this side there's this poplar tree. Light is coming from this direction, so it's kind of lit up over here. Okay, so I've added some titanium white and some more yellow. Kind of a light green tree here. Maybe over here as well, something like that. All right, I'm adding some alizarin crimson to the mix here, which warms up the green really nicely, because this tree over here is actually a bit warmer. And there's a bit of warmth over here as well, and here. So I'm using some gray that I found on my palette, just kind of a muddy mixture or whatever to indicate a cross street here. All right, mixing up a saturated green using phthalo blue and cadmium yellow medium. There are little bits of brighter green up here, some of the light that's on the lawns, and there's kind of light across the top of some of these shrubs. All right, adding just a little bit of ultramarine to kind of dull it down a bit. The lawns on this side are not quite as bright. Still using this number 8. Okay, there we go. Just picked up some of this dark mixture that was already on the palette. Just kind of indicate some of the darker areas of this tree. Up here, there's like some houses, which I'm going to suggest in a moment. Got a mixture of, it's primarily ultramarine blue, but it does have some phthalo and obviously titanium white. Again, I'm going to keep this sky a little darker than usual because the highlights on the cars are going to be the brightest, you know, the highest value in the painting. So I don't want the sky to compete with those highlights. All right, so I added some titanium white, a bit of cadmium yellow medium, and phthalo for a lighter sky mixture. I'm just going to add it right above, you know, the street here. And then also kind of above the tops of the buildings. All right, so I'm gonna start suggesting some of these houses. Just using some of the gray mixtures that I found on my palette, but then I added a touch of alizarin crimson. Just added some of this gray here into the sky color. Some of the houses are kind of a blue-gray. Still squinting at the scene, just looking at shapes. I'm not trying to paint individual buildings, you know. I'm just looking for the shapes that I see. And you know, when you get back, your imagination will fill in the blanks. All right, so I'm looking for little shifts in the road. So I added a bit of red to the mixture. There's like a gap in the cars there. And then this section gets a little warmer, so I just added some cadmium yellow medium to this gray mixture. Right, that warms it up a little bit. And I'm using the negative space around the cars to kind of carve them out, so to speak. And I'm still kind of keeping the mixture fairly thin here, because I do like to see some of the previous, you know, darks coming through in the painting. All right, so I'm going to add little bits of sidewalk, kind of suggested sidewalk in here. All right, I mixed up a fresh dark mixture here. And I'm just going to go into these cars. Some of these cars in the distance are pretty light in value. But I'm going to start with the darks. And trying to use this big brush as long as possible. One thing that's nice about using a single brush is that it can give the painting a feeling of continuity. All right, adding some alizarin to this light mixture here. Some of the dryways have some red to them. And it's always nice to get a little bit of red or pink, you know, in this case, into the painting. All right, I got titanium white and ultramarine blue for the first round of reflections on the cars, and the tops of the cars will sort of reflect some of the sky. I don't want to keep this mixture slightly dark, so again, so that the highlights will pop out. And I'm going to try to keep going with this brush, even though, as you can see, it's pretty big for what I'm trying to paint. Not as much sky reflection on this side, a little bit. All right, and there are some light colored cars out in the distance, so I'm just gonna add kind of a light gray mixture, still leaving some headroom for highlights. All right, so I've got a mixture of titanium white and cadmium yellow medium, kind of keeping this thick. All right, so I'm squinting at the cars and just looking for little highlights. And this is gonna be tough because, you know, usually at this point I switch over to the smaller brush, but oftentimes I'm not happy with the results. I think it looks too, as I've said before, like too detailed, or there's not continuity in the painting. So today I'm gonna try, you know, to keep going with this brush. The light is totally changing. So I'm gonna wrap it up pretty quickly here. All right, so going back in and doing a little bit of cleanup around these cars, but I don't want to get too tidy with them. And there's things like these irregularities, I want to maintain those. And that came from using this large brush. So those little unpredictable bits are actually, you know, I really like those. Up here there's a crosswalk, so it's kind of like it says stop on the street. And here too. And then there are a few like manhole reflections as well. All right, so here is what I finished up with. I spent about an hour on this painting, and my goals were my usual goals, which was to have a nice composition and a convincing feeling of light. Because it's kind of a complicated scene, I wanted to make sure that I had color harmony. So I was able to finish the painting just using 4 colors and titanium white. So to recap the colors I used ultramarine blue, phthalo blue green shade, which is a color from Utrecht, basically phthalo blue, alizarin crimson, not a permanent version. I used original alizarin crimson, and then I used cadmium yellow medium. And I did not feel limited at all in the colors that I was able to achieve. And like I said, the idea of using a limited palette is that it keeps your options somewhat narrow, and you're more likely to have nice color harmony in your paintings. Also, I think it's really good to learn to mix your colors using the primaries. So if you haven't tried doing that, I think you might be surprised at the amount of, you know, just the variety of colors you can get. What else? Using the large brush was also kind of helpful in keeping continuity and a sort of unity in the painting as well. So a lot of times I think less is more. So go out there, find yourself a simple composition, simple shapes, and maybe give it a go and let me know what happens in the comments. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you'd like to see some extra videos and help support the channel, there's a Patreon link down below. It's the Patreon support that actually helps keep me making these videos. So if you're enjoying the videos and you want to pitch in, it's much appreciated. Other than that, stay creative. I'll see you guys in the next video.